We do have one resource that we've been working on called the Landscape Measures Resource Center, which you can look at www.landscapemeasures.org. I was realizing in preparing for this talk that we don't have nearly as much on livestock as we ought to have in there, and we're working on building that. But we're also starting to look at climate measures that can be used, and some of that might be useful to you. Just to finish off, just to let you know a little bit about who we are, we do work internationally and only began working in the U.S. over the last 2 years, although many of my colleagues have worked for a long time in the United States. But we really work in 3 areas. We work in capacity building and technical assistance for multi-stakeholder landscape initiatives in different parts of the world. We work on research and impact assessment to figure out what's working and what isn't working, and support efforts to do landscape monitoring and assessment. And then we work on enabling policy and market environments to try to shift the incentives locally, nationally, and internationally so that farmers and ranchers have an incentive to participate in these collaborative conservation initiatives. We're not a very large organization. There's only 15 of us. But we are a nonprofit, and we get funding from multilateral organizations like the FAO, the International Finance Corporation, the World Bank. We get money from governments like the United States and the Netherlands. We get funding from a number of other NGOs like WWF and Conservation International, the World Agroforestry Center, those kinds of groups, and from grant-making organizations like the Packard Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation and groups like that. So, and we also get money from private individuals, and we would be delighted to accept any donations that anyone would like to make after you've given something to the Quivira Coalition. So. The climate issue, I know we're still debating it in the United States. A lot of parts of the world are not really debating it. They're really, really very, very concerned and are organizing and rechanneling funding around climate change. And I think it's really important for farmers and ranchers to really be very visible and offer solutions. Say, we are a solution. Let's find some creative ways and let's get the funding to us. Let's not look at these really huge, engineering things that are going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars to store. We have solutions here that have good co-benefits to them. So yeah, there's no way to stay out of the politics of this. It is, and will probably for a while remain controversial. There's really big concerns about, I would say particularly by groups who really think the priority is to shift our energy trajectory of the world and move to a low carbon emissions energy economy, of being concerned about terrestrial carbon for a couple of reasons. One, as a distraction. They're concerned it would be a distraction. There's a lot of concern about monitoring, which I think is quite misplaced, actually, because they've been using as a model from the energy side, which is a very different kind of a situation. In my view, we're talking about terrestrial sequestration happening at such a large scale that small errors of measurement would not be so significant. They're also concerned about the potential for reversibility. You could restore degraded lands, but if people came in, 10 years later and messed it up again, that carbon would get back into the atmosphere. So I think there's both some good and some not so good reasons why there's some concern about offsets, particularly within the regulatory regime. So the European trading system for carbon has never included any kind of terrestrial carbon in their program. People have been pushing them, wanting to expand it because the monitoring methodologies have gotten so much better. They're still not perfect, but they're way much better. And I think there's still a lot of political concern about incorporating it into regulatory systems. And you saw that same thing happening within the United States when we were discussing the sort of a potential design of a cap and trade. I think, however, what you see a lot of support for at the international level are alternative mechanisms to finance and support terrestrial carbon. The main concern has to do with making it possible for an oil company to get credits by having ranchers do it rather than reducing their emissions themselves. That's the main source of contention. But I think there's a lot of interest. The big problem is that the really, really big money is in carbon offsets. And the money, other sources of money, really needs to come from the public person, from taxpayers. And I think that's been the big concern about people who've been trying to push to get terrestrial carbon into the regulatory markets, because actually carbon is the largest single commodity in the world right now in terms of financial value. And so there was a desire that can we access that for sustainable land management? So there's a lot of people still pushing for that. But I think what you see right now is let's use other mechanisms. Let's use voluntary payment systems, markets. Let's use national programs to support governments. Let's use support the developing world to have, but again, these are all mostly going through public programs. And I think there's a desire to not have the whole answer to climate change be done within the public sector. So I think we're still in a very much an early stage. Also, there's been a huge change in the last 2 years politically around agriculture in the international. It wasn't even present. There were like no farmers at the United Nations Framework Convention meetings at all. And that's really changing now, and they're going to start they're probably going to start a technical program that will look more systematically. There's a global alliance for research now for reducing emissions from agriculture. I don't think they're doing too much yet, are they, Constance, with livestock? But they will. They are for intensive feedlot operations. So I think it's definitely not going to go away, but I think we're going to have to. I think we're in a period this decade of experimenting with institutional models for financing this kind of work, and it's probably not going to come immediately from the regulatory offset system, which may not be bad.